Hi, I'm Brian DeShazer, Director of the Pacifica Radio Archives, and this is From the Vault, our weekly radio series that takes history out of the oldest and largest collection of public radio programming in the United States and puts it back on the radio. This week we bring you a recording from one of the first prominent white Southern women to publicly denounce racial segregation. Here is author Lillian Eugenia Smith reading from her last book published the year of this recording, 1964.
This that I'm going to read now is one of the monologues I wrote for the book called Our Faces, Our Words. It's called You Think About the Three Who Were Killed. You think about the three who were killed, and most of us now believe they were killed. You think about the 6 or 7 Negroes whose names nobody quite remembers, who were killed earlier, and the dozens who were beaten and maimed, and the hundreds of young civil rights workers who, brave and scared, unarmed except with compassion and belief in human dignity and their yearning for freedom, are risking their lives every day, hoping to help, hoping somehow to dramatize human need so their fellow Americans cannot turn away and forget. You think of this, and then you think of the mobs, of the bands of psychotic terrorists, of the poor whites. Not poor in terms of money anymore, but poor and deprived in terms of human culture, of spiritual richness, of civilized morality. The poor whites, how terrible they are. How afraid everybody is to see this cultural depletion. Look at their faces in the mobs. Look at the policemen's faces. Look at the sheriffs and their deputies with criminal records. Study those faces hard. Look deep into the emptiness of their souls. And then remember who made them that way. The old planter, yes, even now trying to do the same in rural areas, but the industrialists too. The early factory owners of the South who made their workers sharecroppers just as surely as the farm workers were sharecroppers, taking everything away from these whites except the drug of white superiority. The powerful ones fed the poor whites this drug so they wouldn't crave the bread their bodies needed and the values their souls had to have. You remember they used to say, "Leave the making of money to us and the wages. You don't need unions. Now you just give up the idea of unions and you can do anything you want to with the Negro." That's a bargain. And while it was not often said in actual words, it was a bargain. And now, today, the poor whites collect in mobs with their guns and their iron bars, and they are protected by the cops with their tear gas and cattle prods. And most of us try to see only little bits of what is happening. Most of us try not to recognize its significance for us. And I get up on Sunday in my pulpit and try to say the truth. I look down on those glazed, smooth faces of the indifferent ones, and my heart sickens. Something tells me to go easy, be tactful, be gentle, and something else in me that I think is closer to Jesus Christ tells me to drive these indifferent ones, these dead souls, out of his temple. And I think, how? How can I do it? How does one today drive the indifferent ones out of the holy places and tell them to stay away until they have cleansed their souls and done something, acted, spoken, to change this terrible thing that has come so close to destroying us at the center of our being? Yes, this is part of the movement, too. The movement toward a clean, honest, compassionate life for all men. The movement of our century toward relationships that are deep and real. The movement toward quality, excellence. I feel part of this movement, yet I have never demonstrated on the streets. And this troubles me. Perhaps things have gone so far that every decent person must demonstrate in a public place, maybe in church, maybe in a business club, maybe on the streets, to push away this thing, this terrible thing that has come too close to us. This spiritual indifference, this I don't really care, this why did they go to Mississippi unless they were looking for trouble? This awful non-involvement that has turned some of our towns and cities over to the poor white mobs and their demagogues. Turn them over to these pitiful creatures who get their kicks out of looking down on Negroes, who in their addiction cling to segregation as the only thing that makes life endurable for them. I am torn by this. I cannot get it off my mind. I think one day I should stay in my church, try to help these rich, indifferent ones find their way to compassion and concern. And then I think, no. I too should go to Mississippi and risk my life with these young ones who are doing something that most Americans think will not really help. But how can we say that? Jesus and his 12 were a pitiful little group. Nobody in our 20th century today would think a group like that could change anything, but they did. How do we know these young demonstrators cannot, with God's help, bring miracles to pass? We don't know. And it is this loss of faith, this compulsive dependence upon numbers, quantity instead of quality, that is pushing us away from personal integrity and the spiritual power that comes to us when we do what is right. My congregation, except for 12 or maybe 20, do not believe this. They use God's church for social purposes, to give them status and a spurious security. Oh, they have their charities, but nothing that touches them. Then why do I stay in the church? Why? I ask myself, and the answer is hard to find. I think I still believe God can work miracles, even in the church, but I don't know. God, as we look at human history, seems to have had a way of choosing one man, one boy, one woman, or a small band of men to do his work. The church should sustain the work that the lonely ones do. That is its job. But does it? I envy those in the movement who have found practical ways of helping, such as the skills banks, to help Negroes find jobs they're fitted for. I envy those who are working on better housing in the cities, who are working with the little children to teach them to talk and to relate and to love. I know these earthly practical things must be done, and more and more and more of them. But I also know that my job may be simply to risk and maybe die, to help Negroes find their way out of the swamps that white supremacy put them in. I know that I may need to do this, that some of us whites may need to die for our collective sins. I know this. And I sit here thinking of the three, wondering what helped them through it at the last, wondering what they thought about, hoping they believed their deaths would not be wasted. And we must not waste these deaths. Nor can we waste the deaths of the unknown Negroes killed in Mississippi and other rural parts of the South week after week, often without any news of the deaths getting to the cities. And we cannot waste their deaths by forgetting the poor whites, who are in many ways far more caught in human misery, in spiritual emptiness than are most Negroes. A hater is a dehumanized man. How can we do else but pity these dehumanized creatures and try to bring them back into society, which the powerful ones of our fathers' time pushed them out of? I have no answers right now. Just hurting questions, just an aching mind, a torn spirit. All I can pray for is that we not waste the sacrifices of the young and brave, that we tear our indifference from us so that we too can be free. Will America hear in time? Are we headed toward a lawless time of mobs and ghosts and brutality of hand and spirit? Are we? I fear it. And yet something in me cries, no. We'll find the right road. We must. We'll somehow find the new faith, the courage, the energy that will help us change. I pray so. This monologue is called It's a Terrible Sleep When You Can't Wake Up. We slept so long, everybody. When we walked in our sleep. We went to school a little and slept through it. Slept through cotton picking, through hunger, rain, cold, slept through moving north even. We turned over, sat up, lay back down again. It's a terrible sleep when you can't wake up. Now and then you feel there's something outside you, maybe a war or a flood or a freezing winter or a white man with a gun, maybe a mob, maybe a dead body in the path, or a face you'd better say howdy to, or a white lady you'd better step off the sidewalk for. Or somebody tells a joke and you yap out in your sleep. You turn over, giggle, and slip back where you've been. Sometimes of a Sunday in church at the singing, you almost wake up. Or in a graveyard at a burying, as you edge up to death, you feel sleep about to leave you. Or sometimes with a girl or a bottle of corn liquor, you get noisy, laugh, belch, grunt, cuss aloud, roll over and over. Now and then you sit up, look around, stare at the years. You see a star way off, but it always goes somewhere. You start sleepwalking again, past doors you can't enter, 10,000, only you don't count, 100,000 you can't enter, but you don't care, past 10 million things you can't touch, can't say, can't do, can't think, can't feel. You doze through it, turn over, sleep a little more, a little more, a little more. That's the way it was. Then something happened. Did Jesus call? Did God shake us? Did the earth tremble? Did a trumpet blow? Did the walls fall? Why is everybody running? Are they going somewheres? Come on, you, we're going somewheres. Yeah, get up, open your eyes. We're going somewheres, hurry. We're going somewheres, you gotta hurry, see? Get up and hurry, or they'll leave us. This monologue is that of a young white Southern girl in 1964. It's called The Search for Excellence Takes Us to Strange Places. I was 12 when the Supreme Court decided segregated schools wouldn't do. I took it for granted. that before long things would be different at our school. But nothing happened, and nothing much happened anywhere. In our school, some of the kids told more rough jokes than usual, repeated more words that would hurt Negroes if they heard. Some said they'd fight back if desegregation came. They'd show those colored kids what was what. A lot of us didn't like this talk, but we didn't do anything. Most of us wouldn't have minded integration, but we didn't do anything. We didn't tell our principal how we felt, or the teachers, or the school boards, or those white kids who were muttering the nasty jokes. We were scared. Not scared of the integration experiment, but scared to act freely according to how we really felt. Scared of those mobs folks talk about. Scared that Negroes, if they came to our school, would get hurt. Scared of the unknown, I suppose. So we made ourselves indifferent. We tried to tell ourselves we felt all right about it, but after all, why was it our business to speak out? People away from here have asked why. Why didn't you do something? Remember how the commentators asked it over and over, and nobody could say. I was dumb. I couldn't say. But now I know this is what segregation has done to us whites. It has paralyzed us. We don't dare act out what we know is right. We don't dare say what we know should be said. We let the demagogues say anything, but we are mute. Oh, I know. We are scared of the goons and the ghosts and the monsters segregation has bred. For 100 years, the nice people sat here and let politicians and the power structure that supported them chain our minds with their lies until we couldn't think straight. Listen to intelligent white people talk on this subject. Most of them lie and they don't care. They don't want to find the truth. They just repeat sleazy excuses they've heard before. Educated people, even with PhDs, can't think critically. Half of them end up talking about mongrelizing or states' rights. And when you say the states don't have any rights, read your Constitution, they stare as if you're crazy. Oh well, I was as bad as the rest. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to be decent. I wanted to become something you might call a human being, but I was so scared. Later at college, I went north to school. I heard Martin Luther King speak. Then I heard Bayard Rustin. I went down to New York to hear them. Then I had an interview with Anna Arnold Hedgeman, a nice woman. I began to read. I was watching what was happening in Africa. I kept up with the sit-ins. After last summer, well, it hit me hard. Everything hit me. I thought, join the movement. Get out and help break down the segregation system. Do it quick before you get scared. Picket, sit in, you've got to save your own soul. And I did it. And it wasn't long before I was in jail. The cops are rough on white girls, rougher than on Negro girls, and they're rougher with Negro girls than with Negro men. Well, there I was, and they had put me by myself. I'm not very brave. I was more scared than a white girl from the north who was jailed at the same time. She went in laughing. I admired her, but I knew she didn't know what was ahead. Or maybe I was scared from a lifetime of being warned, don't do that, don't speak out, don't take a stand, you can't, something awful will happen. I don't know. I had heard the stories of how a matron in one jail had made some of the girls in the movement strip naked. Then she let other inmates hit them, make foul jokes and so on. I held as steady as I could, walked back and forth in my cell. There was a small window. I stood there looking out. And to keep from sliding into panic, I sang the songs of the movement, We Shall Overcome, Freedom, and the rest of them. I'm from a Methodist family. Pretty soon I was singing old Sunday school songs. Funny how deep down they go in you. I was humming, Wash me and I shall be whiter than snow, thinking of those old days. Sin, sin, sin. Everything nearly was a sin except segregation. Whiter than snow, that means we are pure. Dark, that means they are impure. How asinine can the human mind get? Segregation, a holy ritual, more meaningful than the Lord's Supper. You couldn't question it. You bowed down and worshiped the whiteness it ritualized. It scared me to think this. I had read it before. Now in that jail, that night, I believed it. We've lost God. We've surrounded ourselves with godlets. Our white skin is the number one God we worship. When you've got white skin, you don't even need a soul. I tried to laugh. I cried. Mississippi, that is where I was. Bleak and beautiful and terrible, that state. Beyond tragedy. What Holocaust will they bring on themselves? Will they push things as far as did the Nazis? Can they, and still remain a part of our nation? Is there no way? Someone was at the door. The cop. I had on my shirt and jeans, just as I was when he arrested me. He arrested me for breaking a traffic rule, he said. He knew I was working with, quote, the niggers, and so he took me to jail. No accident, no one hurt, nothing had happened. I hadn't even broken a minor traffic law. But things are not real here. Truth is an irrelevance. I've never met a truthful cop. There may be some somewhere. I'm sure there are a few in Atlanta or Richmond, maybe in North Carolina or Tennessee, but I have never come near one in the movement. He began to talk. I tried not to listen. The words were mostly words I can't say aloud. He wanted to know what nigger I had slept with the night before. Was it fun? You must have some excuse, he said. A damned good one for going out and sitting in with these niggers. They pay you for it, do they, at nights? I stood there humming. I didn't dare stop. My heart was skipping. I was scared, outraged. There was nobody to call to for help. This is the worst part of segregation, this foul obscenity that rots white people's minds away. You feel minds are crawling with lice that have crept out of the rotten, dirty places in our lives. And cops seem to have more than their share. Why? Why do we have these people for policemen? Is it true the world over that the dregs are always the police? I don't know. They should be the very best. They should be men we believe in and admire for their good judgment, their moral cleanness, their self-discipline. But in the South, it doesn't turn out that way. Down here, most of them seem obsessed about mixed children. Millions of mixed children. Sex and sin wrapped up in a dirty cloth called segregation. But it's all right just so the kids are illegal. A legitimate mixed race child. Ah, there's the horror, the taboo. A child born from a holy marriage? Oh no, that's terrible. I couldn't sleep after he walked away. It was so still. All the big sounds, deathly still. But 1,000 thin noises ran along my nerve endings. I was cold, shaking cold. I clung to the window. I clung to outer space, hung on desperately, trying to forget everything behind me. The South I love and fear, its sweet stench, its gentle terrors, its sudden naked horrors, and its desire to be good, and its apathy, aching to be good and yet unable to move. Why can't the warm-hearted, intelligent Southerners change? Why can't they move? Why can't they speak out? Daddy, why haven't you spoken out? You have nice feelings. You didn't join a white citizens' council. You wouldn't lynch or dynamite anyone. You wouldn't push and scrouge, or would you? You don't say nigger, but you are against the public accommodations measure. You think a city has a holy right to close itself up against a part of the citizenry because of color. You think property rights are more important than human rights, don't you? You're really against the entire civil rights bill, aren't you? They're taking away our rights, you say. They're tearing up the Constitution. You say this, my Father, whom I adore, and yet you read Plato. You're supposed to be a kind of local authority on the old Greeks, Dad, all time quoting Aeschylus. How can you? How can you? How can you? I'm crying. I'm a little girl crying because she wants a brave, honest father who seeks the truth of his time, not the Greeks' time, who can look beyond this awful mess we're in. You went to Harvard, and yet you fall for the lies Mr. Rich White told Mr. Poor White long ago. You keep him satisfied with poverty and sharecropping and all the rest of it. How can you? Don't you know why they said that? Don't you know it was to keep the poor whites from demanding their rights as Americans? Do you need me to tell you? That is why Mr. Rich White handed them a drug instead of bread, a tranquilizer for their hungry souls to feed on. And now it's driven some of them mad. I love you. That is what hurts. I admire so much of you. When you're off the subject of race, you are sane and erudite and charming. My mother, she does more about the problem than you do, Dad, but she does it secretly. She's afraid of what you will say. That isn't fair to her. There's an edge of you that troubles her, too. She worships you, but there is a little edge she keeps the bright light off of. Last summer, when the trouble happened in Birmingham, in our hometown, you didn't do anything. Even after the bombings, even after those 4 little girls were killed, you didn't do anything. Not a damned thing. You're respected, you're prominent, you're popular, you are a member of the best clubs, you're on the board of stewards of our church, and you didn't do a thing to help. To say, this is wrong. Oh, I know. You said at home, my, that's pretty bad. But you didn't say it where anyone else could hear. What could you have done? You and Mother could have got in your car and called on the heartbroken parents. You could have said, we are sorry. That one little thing might have unbound you, freed you. Mother says you think I sat in just to embarrass you, to shame you. She says you think I deliberately got myself put in jail. Maybe I did. Maybe I did just that. If I did, I was wrong.
That's a poor reason for fighting for any good cause. But whatever my motive, I had to do something. Maybe I screamed to drown out your silence. And so I ended up in a Mississippi jail, listening to a dirty, low-down cop, me, your Vassar-educated, summer camp-trained daughter who loves poetry and philosophy and art and human beings, and the excellence her father told her always to search for. But to search for excellence may be dangerous. It takes us to strange places sometimes, doesn't it, Dad?
You are listening to author, lecturer, and human rights activist reading from her last publication, Our Faces, Our Words, by Lillian Smith. If you would like a copy of this program, you can call us in the archives at 1-800-735-0230. You can visit us online at fromthevaultradio.org, or you can search our entire collection at pacificaradioarchives.org. And now back to the program, and Lillian Eugenia Smith reading Our Faces, Our Words from 1964.
This monologue is called We Were There, Man, and We Knew We Were There. It's the voice of a very young man speaking. I must have been about 16 when I saw that painting. A Negro boy leaning against a big white post, every muscle in him limp, acquiescent, nothing to give out except yassa. I felt naked, stripped. I was that painting, or it was me. This is the way you are, my body whispered. All Negroes are. My mind burned. I couldn't say, it's a stereotype, laugh it off. I couldn't even get mad. All my glands would do was pour out shame. I looked around to see what others thought. Most were just talking to each other. They didn't hear what it said. I went out on the street. A car honked. I jumped out of its way. I wasn't looking. Something in me moved a little. Now I was resenting that picture. Not much, but some. A white man painted it, I told myself. Even the artists lie about us, showing us limp, no fight, all time making us nothing. I walked 2 blocks, whistling something or other, turned into a side street, walked on. Damn it, a half block from our house, I looked straight at a Negro boy leaning against a post, muscles gone, soul gone, nothing to give out, nothing to fight back with. I kept seeing it, that painting come alive. I'd meet it at street corners, see it leaning against a railing or a lamp post, meet it as I cut through the alley. There it would be, squatting, looking down at the dirt, spitting now and then, or lying flat, hat over eyes, asleep. It turned into my private nightmare, hung on the edge of everything I did or looked at. And then in 1961, I stopped seeing this thing that whispered its kinship to me. It left me one Monday when I was picketing on A Street. We picketed a big restaurant, 55 of us. God Almighty, there we were in the dead center of White Town, picketing the biggest store on that biggest street. Man, we were there, and we knew we were there, and we knew what we were going to do there. We were there to get something that belonged to us, a gift from God, and it had our names on it. A right we inherited from the Constitution, and it had our names on it too. No more yassa. We were saying no. No, no, no. To closed public doors, to closed voting booths, to slum housing, to ignorance, to Jim Crow courts and their judges. No. And every time we said it, the slimy, nasty yassers slid out of us and slunk down a past, gone forever. To tell the truth, I sort of flipped when I realized all of that was gone. Muscles told me so, bones shouted it, bodies moved sure of the next step, sure of the next encounter, sure of tomorrow. A fellow next to me on the picket line said, kind of shook up by it all, "My God, they see us. We're real." I laughed easy. Then I laughed big as a cop came near. He came up close, he watched me, but he didn't touch me. He just watched me. And from his face I knew he was looking at more than me. He saw 1,020 million niggers with me. "Yes, mister," I said, soft-like to myself. "You're going to keep on seeing us until you stop seeing us as nigger. When we're sure you can see us as Americans, as human beings, then, well, we'll go back to school and get on with the business of living, and we'll help you get on with the business of living, too. But we got to rub the yasser out of your ears, see? We've just got to make you hear us say no. And we've got to be sure you learn what it means. We don't hate you, but we don't fear you either. You see, we've got something worth dying for and living for. We're lucky. You can't scare us, not even with your dogs, not even when you turn animal to keep us from being human. We got power, man. Yeah. Power to say no. Power to make you say yes. Because history is with us, right is with us, economics is with us, science is with us, mercy and love and freedom are with us. We won't rub it in, bud. We won't make you say yes, sir. But you've got to learn to say yes. And mind your manners when you say it. Right?
This monologue is a young Negro woman talking. She has been in Mississippi. It is called Nonviolence. Deep in my heart, I wonder. The jet was lifting. Water was under us. New Orleans was behind us. Everything terrible behind us. We were leaving what your mind can't work out. Your heart turns away from. Your soul, no, not leaving it. It was just dropping farther away below us. Distance was segregating it, making it small enough to say for a second, it's gone. But it is here, always here inside me, always here inside you, inside every one of us in this country. You can't shut yourself away from terror any more than you can from fallout. The blast is, it has happened. Hate has exploded, and the fallout is just beginning. I stared below me. So green. Spring here, summer almost here. Water gone now. Just soft, green life growing everywhere. So beautiful, so scary in its strength as it bursts through death, and here we are. We Negroes, we whites, fertilizing all the greenness with hate and fear. What is wrong? What is wrong with us? Down in the Delta, there we were. Most of us young, some of us Negro, a few whites, human beings on a mission to help other human beings. And sometimes we behaved like devils. Why? Spilling with ideals, honestly, absolutely honestly, willing to die for dignity and freedom, for the poor little poked-out bellied children, and yet turning on each other, storming out at each other. Why do you stay? We don't want you. We can do more without you. And a proud white voice that was humbly disturbed last night about a family we had to do something for, saying in a cool, proud, white voice, "Why do you hate us so? Oh God, why do you hate us so? Us, us, us. You're in our way," a black guy said. "You clutter up our minds. You drag up the past. Your presence keeps reminding us of how you always come out on top." On top of what? Cool white voice trembling now. "The girls always cry. They can't take it without showing they're hurt. On top of the heap, see? Don't you remember?" Black voice suddenly soft with sarcasm. "Don't you remember history?" And sometimes a quiet white voice will say, after swallowing hard, "I understand. I know white skin is something it's easy to react to, like Pavlov's dog and the bell and so forth. But this is pure physical reaction, and we should be responding, not reacting. The Klan reacts to your black skin too, but you're not on the level of Klansmen. No, I don't understand why you load those of us down here helping with the sins of the millions of whites who are indifferent. We care. We honestly care." And then a soft black voice says, "We know it. We know you care. But we are a little jealous, maybe, for fear you'll be a little smarter somehow. Show us up somehow." "Oh, you can't mean that. You are a PhD. I haven't even finished college. If I ever question anything you do, it's when my experience as a white warns me of white psychology. I don't think you always understand white psychology. You fear it, hate it, but you don't always understand it. Although maybe your old grandfather did." Damn! Don't you see? That's what you do that makes us rage. Talking about dear old Uncle Tom, grandfather, whose wisdom. But you are stereotyping. And stereotyping is a sin, no matter who does it. If your grandfather understood the twisting of a white man's mind and soul, it was because he had to deal with it successfully in order to stay alive. It wasn't because he was an Uncle Tom. On and on and on, like this. Sometimes half the night, raging with each other. Oh, this would have pleased Senator Eastland and Governor Barnett. This is exactly the way they hope we will behave with each other. But we're under strain, more maybe than the GIs were in combat. A more subtle strain. We never know what's going to happen next. The incidents we get involved in pierce us to our depths. We have no built-in resistance to this kind of strain. We want to be individuals, but everything around us is organized around the idea of color. Everything. And the whites in the Delta are pretty awful. The indifference of the nice ones is harder to take than the cruelty and obscenity of the cops and politicians and racists and poor whites. Add to it things happening everywhere else. Add to it the stunning cold-heartedness of those Southern senators in Congress, whose stall-in was far worse, many times worse than the stall-in that didn't happen at the World's Fair, but who really criticizes the senators. There is no nationwide criticism. Just a few liberals, A few church people speak up against them. But when we Negroes do something, oh my, the high moral standard expected of us. And we try. God, how we try to keep cool, to feel compassion, to stay nonviolent. But how can you with pressure after pressure after pressure? And so, to keep from taking guns and shooting things out in the Delta, we Negroes turn instead against these white kids helping us down here. Sure, we know it's not easy for them to come and help, but nothing is easy for us. Nothing. So we turn on them and we storm and we curse and we take it out on them. And sometime in a pretty rough way. And we hate them. Really hate them sometimes. And we don't understand these strange feelings in us. We are ashamed. We don't justify. We know we can't. And yet, you see, you need to be a saint to stay nonviolent in the Delta. You're ringed with violence, internal and external. It's everywhere. How are you going to meet this violence with the ordinary love and compassion of an ordinary man or woman? It can't be done. Okay, I'm glad I said it. It just can't be done. So what do you do next? Is there something between nonviolence and violence that will work? What? Gandhi, with this talk of love and the search for truth, somehow kept the rage of the Indians from spilling over on the British. But when India got its freedom, this pent-up rage spilled out on fellow Indians. Hindus against Muslims, Muslims against Hindus. All of these fellow Indians, but suddenly they were raping, killing, burning each other. And finally, to finish it off, a fellow Hindu assassinated Gandhi, as if to say, "You made us better than we were able to be. You told us we could love instead of hate. Well, we can't, see? And we can't forgive you for telling us that." And so he shot the Mahatma in the garden at twilight at prayer meeting. And all hell broke loose. I wonder sometimes if we who believe in nonviolence, and I still do, have really analyzed that situation in India, its psychological and philosophical roots. Have we ever admitted that the Indians turned their rage on fellow Indians instead of on the British? That nonviolence didn't work after all? Or did it? I don't know. It worked and it didn't work. I looked down. We were getting close to a city. We were not coming down. I wasn't sure where we were. From the Delta, from thousands of acres of black land and little gray shanties, I had now come back to the city. And this meant for me the ghetto. I was born in Harlem, not in a ghetto area, unless it is all that. I lived on one of the better streets and in one of the better houses. But I was born and brought up with the smells and sights and sounds of the ghetto around me. City ghetto, rural ghetto. Which is worse? The climate is easier on you in Mississippi, and the tempo of living is easier, but poverty is the same, and lack of hope for a future. The speed in a city ghetto, yes, that is worse.
for you have less time to think, to dream, to pray about things. A killing is a killing, anyway, I guess. But to me, a city woman, a killing in the Delta seems worse. No reason for this. It just seems worse. Maybe because you have more time to think about it. What happened? Why it happened? Who did it? Why? And all that. I wanted to leave the Delta. I felt I couldn't take any more of it, at least for a while. But I dread getting back to New York, to Harlem, to our pattern of rage, our pattern of loneliness, our pattern of sin, our pattern of stereotyping. Harlem and the Delta. Which is worse? Which is better? God only knows. But the speed makes it harder in Harlem. Harder to know people as people. Harder to think something out. Harder to be alone, although you're just as lonely as in the Delta. Harder to form a relationship. We say we are fighting for our civil rights. But why are we? Unless it is to be free, to form real relationships with our world. Why else? But even with our civil rights, it is hard in a rushing city to form a real relationship with anything, a person or a book or an experience. And here is a real meaning of nonviolence, the reality or the truth of a relationship. Everything in your life is violent except the parts of it that are true and real. A lie is violence. A half-lie is violence. Saying a half-lie about white people or about black people is as violent as knocking somebody down. That is why it is so hard to practice nonviolence. Because it's hard to reject all that is not true and real. We've got to think nonviolently if we want to think the truth. That word. The truth of me. Do I dare think it? The truth of you. Do you dare? The truth of my affair, my relationship with M. Do I know that truth? If I don't, then I am practicing violence. Every time I stereotype anybody, or any group, or any situation, I am thinking violently. Every time I evade thinking this whole civil rights, segregation, human relations thing as it is, every time I look at it on the surface, refusing an understanding of its depths and heights, I am committing spiritual violence. I know this. So, if we learn a little, even a little, as did the Indians, about the meaning of nonviolence, maybe it will be worth our failures. Maybe we've got to become extraordinary people in order to do nonviolently what must be done in this world. We talk about peace. Maybe we have not confessed that as persons we may not yet be capable of achieving peace, because we are not as yet capable of achieving a nonviolent life of the mind, the spirit, the psyche. But we can't stop trying. Even if we fail, we won't fail entirely. Surely this is right. I pray that it is. Surely we must keep trying to become extraordinary. Trouble with us down in the Delta, working at our mission. We thought we could do it, succeed at it, and still remain nice, normal, ordinary people. Well, we can't. We've got to become extraordinary. This is our ordeal. Out of it we'll come all wizened up, or bigger, stronger, maybe extraordinary. In a sense, to reach for stature, for excellence, is more thrilling than to reach for equality. Maybe to get equality of opportunity for the masses, Negro and white, some of us have got to grow until we ache in pain all over. Negroes and the whites who helped them thought they were undertaking a more or less natural thing when they started this revolution for their rights. But if we succeed, we will have to do more than we dreamed of in the beginning. Maybe that is why some whites get so upset and keep asking, but what else are they going to want? Maybe like two fighting dogs, we have one end of truth in our teeth, and they have another end in theirs. Maybe deep down they are fearing not intermarriage, as they say, but the fact that to achieve the right kind of human relations, we've got to change as people, all of us, Negro and white. They've got to find a little excellence too, the whites. Maybe they feel this. Maybe they dimly guess that we've got to throw away that word superior and substitute for it extraordinary. They say we're close to Newark Airport. Well, I'm back to a keyed up people, lonely and lost like me, not at all sure what is right, but shouting that they are sure. Back to white people as indifferent, some of them, as the people in Jackson. I'm going to stay up here. I think I belong here and should work here where I know our ways and customs. It is better than being a missionary in Mississippi. And yet I'm not sure. It'll be easier up here to forget, to grow absorbed in my own personal affairs. Who had any personal affairs in our group in the Delta? That is one reason it was so exciting. We were a core, doing something very special. Oh, we fussed at each other. We sometimes raged. We cursed. But we loved each other too. And sometimes we wept. Even now, having been away for a few hours, I begin to wonder why I let S and T get on my nerves the way they did. Their southern accent had begun to send me wild. Now, even now, I wonder why. I suspect my Harlem accent upset them too. It won't be as adventurous at home, but just as hard. Things are tough up here. Hold on. Don't chicken. You've got a job to do. We're coming down. Wonder what they're having for supper down there. Hot dogs and a can of baked beans, I reckon, as they say. I reckon. Or maybe a family invited them to eat with them. Such sweet hospitality. Come home and eat with us. We'll have a mess of turnip greens for supper. We'll be pleased to have you.
And that does it for this week's program. You've been listening to author and human rights advocate Lillian Eugenia Smith, reading from her 1964 publication, Our Faces, Our Words. Lillian Smith died in 1966 at the age of 68. Thanks for listening and keeping our history alive.